Welcome everyone. What I've done is before you actually start working on Area 6, what I did is I put in a bonus recording, and this is going to be just sort of a quick review on the HAP program. So at the beginning of this semester, you're given instructions to download the most current version of HAP. So hopefully you will have done this by now. If you haven't, this has to be done prior to doing this lab. Anyway, the first thing I'm going to do is open the carrier program. So I have the hourly analysis program, 4.91. That's the version we'll be using. Now, when the program first opens, we're going to hit OK. We're going to hit OK again. Now, if I've been working on a project and I simply save it, the list will show up here. Anything I've worked on will show up here as a saved file. A saved file is something that go-aheads and saves your program, but it keeps it in multiple smaller files. There must be dozens of little files that Carrier generates when you're doing a project. The save feature saves all these dozens of little files, but it doesn't compile them. So when you first open up a program, the file that I'm sending you is a compiled version of the program or the file that you're going to be using for this lab. So if you don't have something saved on here, something that you've been working on, you simply hit cancel on here, cancel again. So you have basically a starting screen. And for me, I'm going to go up under Project. And when you're pulling out a file that's been compiled, in other words, one that's left the computer, been sent somewhere, whatever, you're going to do a retrieve. So we have archive here, retrieve here. So I'm going to retrieve an archive file. And I put my files in a specific spot, at least for this class. So you notice I have a number of different HAP files in here. I'm going to pick out the one for Lab 6. I want to retrieve it. So once you pick that archived file, you want to hit retrieve. It should say that this data has been retrieved successfully. You hit OK. And right away you should see some key information up here, specifically the spaces, the systems, the building, everything will populate. Now, the file folder that you're going to be getting, somebody already built. You would have taken the time to utilize this program throughout your HVAC451 class. We don't have time in this class for you to build the artworks project that you've been working on from scratch. So someone has already taken the time to build or at least put in the spaces for you. So if we take a quick shopping list, we'll notice that there's schedules. In fact, there's quite a few schedules. There's the wall components put in so we know what the U values are. We have the roof components. We have window components. And we have door components. So we have all the basic components in here. Now if you slide all the way to the bottom, we have electric rates and fuel rates. We'll get to that in a second. Right now what we have is enough information built in here as long as somebody put in all the different rooms. Now these rooms should coincide with those space input forms that you were given in week 3. These 7 systems should correspond to the 7 systems that are located in Artworks. Now, quick review. To do a design, well actually the Carrier HAP program is capable of doing 2 separate things. The first thing it does is it'll take your building And if you arbitrarily put in systems, once you have systems put in and assign spaces to these systems, I can run what's called a design. And let me take one at a time. Let's take this basement unit right here under systems. If I go up under report, I can do a design. Now, design is equivalent to a load calculation. It's actually going to run a load calculation for that particular system with the attached spaces. Now, when I select this, the most common things or the most common reports that are valuable are these first four. The first four: a system sizing summary, a zone sizing summary, a ventilation sizing summary, and a system load summary. Those are the four most valuable ones. And usually when I do this, I sort of go in and I default these to that. Now what you can do next is, instead of hit print, which would give you a lot of pages, hit preview. And what it'll do is it'll go through and size the equipment. So if we look on this first page, the very first thing that should be done is you should look at this square footage right here. Does this square footage actually match the square footage for the zones that this covers? Does it match? The next thing we have is we have a total predicted cooling load, 2.2 tons. Down here, it also gives a square foot per ton. Now you have to remember, this is in a basement, fairly deep basement actually. So there's no windows. It keeps a relatively common temperature. So it's really not unusual to have very little air conditioning be able to tolerate, a large amount of square footage. If we continue going down, it'll give the size of the heating load, 7.5 MBH, and the location that the weather's being taken. And unfortunately, we don't have weather for Big Rapids, Michigan, so we picked Grand Rapids, which was the closest. If we continue sliding through this, the different pages, this is a nice page because it says all the different zones that are part of this, or all the different spaces that are part of that zone. Should cross-check this and make sure that somebody did coordinate the correct spaces with the correct piece of equipment. Now in this page right here, we have ventilation. It gives the floor area for the areas, the number of occupants, the maximum supply air that they're predicting, but then also the required outdoor air. Notice that these are all zeroed out. It's important to realize that when the energy auditor went through this building, it was discovered that the building as it sits right now, not any of the air handling units are currently pulling in outdoor air. So all the air handling units are not bringing in ventilation air whatsoever. Does that generate a recommendation? Absolutely. But it's also important that when we build the simulation in the computer, we exactly match what's currently happening, even if it's wrong. If we continue sliding down, we get what I call my zero page. This is a quick page that we can scan down and look for things that are zero, like windows, solar loads, zero. Well, that makes sense. It's in the basement. Basically, there's no wall transmission to speak of because it's below grade. Roof transmission, there's no roof, window, etc., etc. Now, again, we have 4 pages. That's for this unit. We could go down and do each individual unit. Now, that gives us our load calc. All these systems have to be tied into a building. So down here we have a building. We're going to call it Artworks. If we can go into this, we can do the second half of what the Carrier HAP program is capable of doing. The Carrier HAP program is capable of doing a simulation. What ends up happening is we have to add electrical and fuel rates, and we have to add, up here, we have to add simulation weather data. It's also called TMY data, or typical meteorological year weather data. That's because the Carrier program will run this building 1 hour for every hour throughout the course of the year. Pretty impressive. Takes a little bit of computing horsepower to do that. So we need TMY data plus electric and fuel rates, and once we have that, once we build a building, we can come up here, pick the building, go back to report, and hit simulation. Now the simulation, there's two really key things that we need out of this. We need annual component cost and we need annual energy cost. Those two for absolute sure that we need. All these other things we can sort of use later on when we start doing what ifs. But for right now, the component cost and energy cost are crucial. Again, I don't hit print, I hit preview. Now, the one thing you'll notice is there's no totals here. We have a square footage, but we don't have any totals. If we leave this and go back, there's no utility rates. That's something that you're going to have to do in the lab. You're going to have to go back to the lab that you did last week, that utility lab, and you're going to have to enter a customer charge. There's no tax rate because they're tax exempt. And then you're going to have to put a cost per kWh in for electric. We're using a simple rate. So you enter in a cost per kWh and a customer charge. This cost per kWh was calculated in that spreadsheet last week. The customer charge is something taken, well, right off the bill, and it's something you had to enter into that spreadsheet. You're going to have to do the same thing with the fuel or natural gas rate. You're going to have to put a price per therm, which is same as CCF, and you're going to have to put a customer charge. So you're going to have to do those two things. Now, once you do those, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to retrieve one that already has some information. Now in this one, I know that I have fuel rates put in. So if I go back to the building, I hit reports, hit simulation. Again, I'm looking for component cost and energy cost. Hit preview. Now all of a sudden I have an annual energy cost. 17,842. If you go back and look at the utility bills that you calculated last week, that's actually right on the button. I mean, it's actually right on to the dollar's worth. So I did a good job building the HAP program. Anyway, the files that you're looking for are tables and charts. Here's the first one. Annual component costs, and you'll notice that it gives percent that lighting contributes, percent that other electrical, percent that the fans on the air handling, percent cooling, percent heating. This is something that's required to be copied and placed inside a typical energy audit. When the government wants an energy audit done, this is something they typically want to see in the document. If you look underneath it, here's the corresponding table that goes with the pie chart. This also should be included in the document. This is something you're going to need to put in the lab for next week. Here's the annual energy cost. how much is non-HVAC electric costing, how much is HVAC electric, and how much is natural gas costing us. And again, the corresponding table. All four things have to be clipped out of here and put in the document. Now, the way I do it, I use a screen capture program. I use something called Snagit. So if I want this chart, I come down here and pick my Snagit program. And I have a capture button down here. I hit the capture button. I come up here and it shows a little target of where I stretch a window across what I want to pick. I release, and then it goes to this little file folder. Well, I'm going to pick it right out of the file folder. I'm going to right click on this, hit copy, close this, shrink this, and I'm going to open another file. Let me just open a blank publisher. And on a publisher file, I can right click and hit paste. And there's my chart right in the document. Now, some programs allow you to do a paste directly. Adobe PDF, you have to go up under Edit, and the paste is on a drop-down menu at the top. So it does work in Adobe PDF. It's just not a right-click command. It's a go up to Edit and drop-down command, but there is a paste function once you save that from the Snagit. So I could put this here. I could go back to my carrier program, drop down to the table, go back to my screen capture program, capture the corresponding table, right-click copy, go to my document, right-click paste. It's that easy. So that's just a quick side note on how to get information or extract information out of the carrier program that we're going to need. Now, one other thing that I want to show you real quick. When somebody put in these systems, let's take a look at the basement system. Under the Equipment tab, notice there's central cooling and central heating. If we go under the cooling, somebody put in the appropriate EER for that piece of equipment. It's important to notice that where that is, because later on, if you make suggestions on upgrading equipment, the difference will be a change in EER, or the change in efficiency in the equipment that you're speccing out. This is one of the benefits of using the Carrier HAP program to do what-ifs. If I replace a piece of an equipment and it's got an EER of 13, I can change this to 13, hit OK, rerun, and it'll show a change in cost, operating cost. So one of the true benefits of doing an elaborate program is the fact that I can make changes inside here and watch the combination of changes happen and get a final cost of operation. So that's sort of my 10-cent review of the Carrier HAP program. Hopefully you guys really didn't need it because you already had a whole class in it. Anyway, you now can proceed to Lab 6. Thank you.